Looks like we're diving into some seriously deep waters today. Kerberos and golden tickets, you sent over some dense notes, code snippets, even a diagram. I think it's safe to say you're ready for the technical deep dive into Kerberos hacking.
Well, Kerberos, it's designed to be this really secure system for network authentication, but every system has its weaknesses.
Sure.
Right.
For sure.
And the golden ticket attack, it's kind of like finding that skeleton key to the whole kingdom.
Ooh, I like that, a skeleton key. So then this AS-REProasting you've highlighted sounds a little more like cooking than cyber.
Okay, so think of it this way. Some users are set up so they don't actually need to pre-authenticate before Kerberos gives them an access token. Attackers can actually use this to their advantage. Essentially, they're grabbing those authentication tokens, the AS-REPs, and then trying to crack the passwords offline.
So they're like taking advantage of a loophole in the system.
Yeah.
But how do they actually crack those passwords without being on the network?
Well, that's where things get a little more complex. There are a bunch of different techniques. You've got your dictionary attacks, brute force attacks, or even rainbow tables. Really just depends on the complexity of the password and the resources the attacker has at their disposal.
Makes sense. Now, I see you've also got Kerberos highlighted in your notes here. Where does that tool fit into this AS-REProasting scenario?
Kerberos. Oh, that's a tool that's specifically made to exploit this weakness. It takes a list of usernames and tries different passwords against them just systematically.
Oh, okay.
So you combine that with AS-REProasting, and you've got a seriously potent way to potentially compromise user accounts.
Gotcha. Now I'm starting to see the connection to this golden ticket idea. If an attacker manages to get some credentials through AS-REProasting and Kerberos, could that be how they get in to ultimately create a golden ticket?
You're picking this up quickly. Yeah, compromising just a regular user account, that's one thing. But the real goal, getting control of the Kerberos domain control of the KDC, that's the ultimate target if you're going to launch a golden ticket attack.
So the KDC, that's like Fort Knox for all the network's keys.
Yeah.
Once an attacker has access to the KDC, what can they actually do with a golden ticket?
Well, at that point, they basically become the ultimate insider threat. A golden ticket lets them impersonate any user, even domain admins.
Wow.
Free reign across the whole network. And here's the scary part. It's really hard to detect.
Wait, hold on. Undetected?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't the system flag a forged ticket?
Think of it like this. From the network's point of view, the golden ticket looks totally valid. It's like having a perfect counterfeit bill. It looks real, feels real, passes every security check.
So it just slips right under the radar.
Pretty much.
Now, this diagram you sent, it seems to map out the golden ticket attack. Can you walk us through it a bit? I'm seeing arrows pointing to the KDC and then branching out all over the place.
Yeah, so this is showing the flow of the attack. First, the attacker has to actually get control of the KDC.
Right.
Often the hardest part. Might exploit vulnerabilities, use social engineering, or even leverage, those compromised credentials we were just talking about.
Right.
Then once they control the KDC, they can basically make their own golden ticket, granting them access to, whatever they want.
So they become the ultimate puppet master.
Pretty much. They can set how long the ticket lasts, which users it can impersonate, even the specific computers it'll give them access to. They're like a ghost in the system, moving around completely unseen.
That's kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
So much control. How can organizations even begin to defend against something like that?
It is a serious threat, but there are definitely ways to make it harder. Securing the KDC is the most important thing.
Okay, so that's step one.
Yeah, patch vulnerabilities, strong password policies for any accounts with access to the KDC, multi-factor authentication, gotta have it.
All right, so lock down the KDC, make those passwords Fort Knox worthy. What other defenses should organizations be thinking about?
Think of it like layers of security. We want to make it as hard as possible for them to even get that initial foothold, and then even harder to use it. Regular security audits, intrusion detection systems, and then you've got your SIEM tools, secure information and event management. Those can be really helpful.
SIEM tools, right.
Yeah.
So it sounds like this is a constant cat and mouse game then.
It definitely is.
What are some things organizations often miss that could leave them vulnerable?
You'd be surprised how often it's the basics, like not patching systems right away, weak passwords, not auditing user permissions properly. It's like leaving the door wide open.
So golden ticket attacks can be devastating, but not impossible to stop. What would you say is the most important takeaway for someone really diving into this topic?
I'd say understanding how the attacker thinks is key. If you can see how the attack works, you can start building defenses that actually make a difference. And honestly, never underestimate the power of just good security hygiene.
That seems to be a recurring theme here, not a set it and forget it situation.
No, not at all. Security is a journey, not a destination.
Well said. We've covered a lot, and I think our listeners are probably ready to absorb all that for a bit. Let's take a break here and come back with even more insights.
So before we pause, we were talking about good security practices, really understanding how attackers think.
Right, and I think our listeners are really interested in those technical nitty-gritty details of these golden ticket attacks.
Yeah.
You mentioned attackers can actually customize those tickets. What kind of settings are we talking about?
Oh, yeah, definitely. One of the big ones is the ticket's lifetime. Instead of just a few hours, they can set it to expire months, even years later.
So they're basically making a skeleton key that never expires. Doesn't sound good.
Nope. With a long-lived ticket like that, they've got, persistent access to the network, come and go as they please, lay low, quietly siphon off data over time.
Sneaky. What else can they change?
Well, they can choose who the ticket can impersonate. It doesn't have to be, domain admins only. It could be anyone with access to juicy data, specific systems.
So they could, impersonate the CFO.
Yeah.
Get into the financial record.
Exactly. And they can even say, this ticket only works on these specific computers. That way, they're not setting off alarms by poking around everywhere.
So it's a really targeted attack.
Very much so. It's not just this, brute force thing. They're planning it out, minimizing their risk, maximizing the impact. Very strategic.
All this talk about customization is making these attacks sound even harder to find. How do you even spot something that blends in so well?
It's tough, yeah. But not impossible. Traditional security tools might not cut it. You need to be a bit more, creative.
Okay, give us some examples. I'm sure our listeners are all ears for some practical tips here.
One approach is to look for, weird Kerberos ticket behavior.
Yeah.
So a ticket that lasts way too long or gives out way too many privileges, those are red flags.
Look for the outliers. What else?
You can analyze network traffic, look for suspicious patterns. Like if a user is suddenly accessing things they've never touched before, that could be a sign something's off.
Right, you're looking for unusual activity, anything that breaks the usual pattern.
Exactly. And there are specific tools that can help with this kind of analysis. SIEM systems, for example, security information and event management. Those are great at, connecting the dots and spotting potential threats.
SIEM systems, got it. So we've talked about defenses, but it seems like prevention is really key here. What can organizations do up front to make it much harder to launch these attacks in the first place?
Well, yeah, securing the KDC, like we talked about, that's huge. Strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, patching, those are all essential. But there's more we can do.
I'm listening. What else can we do to beef up those Kerberos defenses?
One strategy is this thing called least privilege. Basically, you only give users the permissions they absolutely need for their job, nothing extra.
So no more admin accounts for everyone.
Exactly. By limiting access like that, you're also limiting the damage if someone does get compromised. They won't automatically have the keys to the kingdom.
Containing the blast radius, right?
Yep. And another proactive step is to just regularly review user permissions. Make sure no one's, accumulated too much power over time.
So it's not just about setting up strong defenses initially, but it's also about staying vigilant, making sure everything stays locked down.
100%. Security is a marathon, not a sprint. Always got to be adapting, changing your defenses to stay one step ahead.
Our listeners getting a real sense of how tricky these attacks can be. But before we wrap up, I do want to touch on the cloud. How do golden ticket attacks change when more and more organizations move their systems to the cloud?
Oh, that's a great question, and something a lot of security folks are, thinking about these days. The basic concepts are the same, but the playing field definitely changes.
So instead of a physical KDC, you're now targeting a cloud-based system.
Right. Services like Azure Active Directory, AWS, AAM, those become the new Fort Knox, and the potential for damage. Much bigger.
Because if you control the cloud identity system, you could have access to, everything.
Pretty much. That's why choosing a cloud provider with good security and implementing your own controls within that environment is so crucial.
This has been a really fascinating discussion. Thanks for walking us through all this. Any parting words of wisdom for our listeners as they dive deeper into this topic?
I'd say, even though these attacks are powerful, they're not unbeatable. Understand how they work, build strong defenses, you can significantly reduce your risk.
So knowledge is power, awareness is key.
Absolutely. The more we know about these threats, the better we can protect ourselves.
Great advice. And on that note, we're going to conclude our deep dive here. Hope this episode gave you a good understanding of Kerberos, golden tickets, and what you can do to stay safe. So we're talking about how the cloud really changes the game when it comes to, Kerberos and golden ticket attacks. Like, the attack surface gets so much bigger with cloud identity providers.
Yeah, totally different ballgame. Now, the KDC isn't some physical server hidden away. It's a whole distributed system, could be spread across multiple regions and data centers.
So for an attacker, getting those keys to the kingdom, it gets a lot harder, right?
It does. And that's where things get interesting. They have to change their tactics to target these cloud-based systems. Maybe exploit weaknesses in the cloud provider's infrastructure itself, or even go after the API keys that give you access.
So it's not just about getting a user's password anymore. You have to find ways to break into the cloud provider's security too.
Right. And that takes a whole other level of skill. We're seeing attackers use things like lateral movement, privilege escalation, basically trying to climb their way up to those sensitive systems in the cloud.
Lateral movement. Sounds kind of sneaky. What exactly does that mean?
So it's the idea of hopping from one compromised system to the next, slowly spreading their reach across the network. Let's say they get into a low privilege account.
Correct.
They might use that to then find vulnerabilities in other systems, slowly working their way up to something with access to the cloud identity provider.
So it's like slowly climbing the ladder up to the top of the cloud security castle. And once they're there, that's when they can create those fake golden tickets.
Exactly. And the impact is even bigger in the cloud. Imagine a golden ticket that lets you into multiple customer accounts or even into the cloud provider's own management systems.
Yikes, that's not good.
Not good at all. That's why defense in depth is so important. We can't just focus on the cloud identity provider itself. You need strong security everywhere in that cloud environment.
So lots of layers of protection make it really tough to move around and get those higher privileges.
Yep. Things like network segmentation, micro-segmentation, multi-factor authentication for anything important, those are all critical.
So it's like not just protecting the crown jewels, but securing the whole castle.
Exactly. And you can't let your guard down. Monitoring logs, looking for anything unusual, and being ready to respond quickly to any threats.
It seems like the stakes are so much higher in the cloud. And the challenges, too.
Security is always a challenge, but the cloud, it adds a whole new layer of complexity. We've got to change how we think about security and the tools we use to keep up.
Well, this has been really eye-opening. Thanks for guiding us through this whole Kerberos and golden ticket world, both on-prem and in the cloud. What's one last piece of advice you'd give our listener?
I'd say never stop learning. The threats are always changing, so you gotta stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Keep researching, keep testing things out, never be afraid to ask questions.
That's great advice. Knowledge is power, right? It's our golden ticket in this cybersecurity world.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. We hope this episode helped you understand Kerberos, golden tickets, and how to protect yourself. Stay curious, stay safe, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.